We have our career panel experts here and then also online. And what is really, really awesome about this career panel is that y'all, they all graduated from here. So they aren't just people that we had come in from the professional world. They are literally making or have already made the same path that you are all now trying to make. So they have provided their time for us today to share with you their thoughts, their opinions, their experiences. And so we're very, very grateful for them doing that. So please, y'all, give them a round of applause. They're literally volunteering their time for y'all. Our guests that are here to be enlightened by your wisdom are mostly all psychology grad or undergraduate, right? And then we also have some graduate students as well. So those of y'all that have gone the graduate career path, which are all of y'all, right? You'll also be able to share your insight with our graduate students as well. My graduate students, will y'all actually raise your hand just so we know who you are? I saw two of y'all. I saw one more. But didn't I see Ashley? Sheila. Okay. Let's go ahead and introduce our panelists. Brandon, go ahead.
I'm Brandon Hill. I'm the supervisor of the Mobile Crisis and Access Team and Living Room program. There's like 3 separate programs, but I supervise all of them. And Aiken-Barlow it's a state agency, so we're technically under like the South Carolina Department of Mental Health. Well, South Carolina Office of Mental Health now. We recently had a name change. And I graduated from undergrad here in 2020 and from the master's program here in 2020.
Yay.
Nice. My name is Matthew Williams. I graduated from USC Aiken Psychology bachelor's in 2018, I think, 2017. Then I went on in 2019, 2020 to get my master's in applied experimental psychology. And I'm currently enrolled in a PhD program in intelligence, defense, and cybersecurity policy. I work full-time at Augusta University as the research security officer, and I also teach part-time for the Department of Psychological Sciences, also at Augusta University.
My name is Aisha Knight. I graduated with my undergrad here in 2018, and in psychology, and then I pursued my graduate degree at Liberty University in 2020 for forensic psychology. And then I went on to become a victim advocate at this probation office in South Carolina. And I left there, and now I'm at the solicitor's office, and I am the deputy director for victim witness assistance program for the solicitor's office.
Good morning, my name is Colette Metters. Currently, I am the coordinator of academic advising here at USC Aiken, so some of you look very familiar to me. I graduated here, my undergrad in 2018, and went on to get my master's here, graduated in 21. I also currently serve as an adjunct faculty member, and I did hold my provisional license for individual therapy in North Carolina for a little bit, so I can speak to that as well. Lainey, if you'll introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Lainey Desmet. I went to undergrad up north, but then I came down to USC Aiken and I graduated with my master's in 2023. I currently am an intake coordinator here at Transitional Family Services in Augusta. I've been here for about a year and a half, probably closer to 2 at this point. And I do have my OPC here in Georgia, and I'm in the process of getting 2 others.
2 others. She's a go-getter. Good morning. All right, so thank you guys for introducing yourself. So the way that this career panel is going to work is I am the moderator, so I am Dr. Laura Swain, and I am the professor of Psych 499, which is our capstone course, and the majority of my capstone students are here as part of the course requirement, and then as well as others who would like to come and, of course, get some great information from our career panelists. Since this is part of the Psych 499 course, I allowed my students to submit their questions in advance if they had questions. The career panelists were able to review those prior to, so I'm going to go through those questions. There aren't many. So once I get through those questions, then the floor will be open to the rest of y'all to have your chance for a Q&A session with the career panelists. You can direct your question to a specific career panelist, or you can just ask it generally based on their area of expertise and their profession. All right, so to get started, our first question is, and then also the way that y'all want to participate is if you'd like to, you can all chime in, or if you'd like to take turns on a particular question, if it's more relevant to your field, y'all can just kind of join in that way, but it's not organized in that sense. And you don't all have to provide feedback on each question. So if you feel like it's been answered, then feel free to not have to say anything. So your first question is, what about your career fulfills you most? And what successes make the challenges worth it? Who would like to take their stab at this first?
I guess.
Yeah, go.
Yes, I can. So I work at the prosecution's office, and I guess my joy is because I assist the victims through like the whole court process, and just kind of seeing like them be able to just get some relief from like crimes that's happened to them, whether it's like sexual assault or if there's like murder victim families, stuff like that. If we have a trial and it's a guilty plea or a guilty trial, whatever, it's like a weight that's just kind of like lifted off. And I actually cried my first time, my last trial. And so I guess it just, and it's more of a sense of like happiness. And because I really do have a passion for what I do. So I think that's probably the best feeling that I can explain for, you know.
Thank you.
I can, hold on, actually,
Yeah, please.
I guess in my current role, as I've transitioned to a supervisor, I would say is being able to look at like the clinicians that are under me grow, like helping them develop their skills to be like a clinician, whether it's in like crisis management or just like one-on-one therapy sessions. So that's like fulfilling to me. I think some of the moments that kind of like make it worth it is, although we do a lot of crisis work, which may like involve sending someone to the hospital involuntarily, we know that like they need the help and they don't always recognize that. But a lot of the times, like after they do go to the hospital, they may get well, and then we may engage with that person again, and they thank us for what we do, like out on scene. Because a lot of times when we're responding, we're going out to the person's home as well, which that can be a little invasive as well. But they do normally like tell us they appreciate the work that we do. But that can be like fulfilling, although that can be like a hard decision to like make. Like you're taking someone's rights away to send them to the hospital to be evaluated and things like that too. So that's kind of like what makes it work.
I would like to poll y'all, so also your panelists have a little bit of feel for you. Who is hoping to go to graduate school after they graduate with their undergrad? Who is hoping to go into a clinical direction or a clinical career? Who is hoping to go more of a research career? Who is hoping to go somewhere in the middle? Okay.
I can speak to the middle. So I did hold my provisional license in North Carolina, and I worked at a private practice for a little bit, but I did leave that realm. And so now I am working with individuals in higher education, which I think is very fulfilling. I am not having to do what these brave, wonderful humans over here do. I'm getting to help individuals learn what they want to do for their careers, just like you guys are doing here. And so I'm not as stressed maybe or dealing with mental health crises every day, but what makes it good for me and the challenges is that I get to have conversations about pathways. I get to explore opportunities and options that people didn't always think about, even though it's not concentrated around mental health. There are still decisions that have to be made about graduate school, what direction, like Dr. Swain's asking, and so it might not be in the nitty-gritty like the clinicians are, and that's super valuable, but it's still really rewarding to me to be able to have conversations with individuals just on a different topic. And so my skills that I learned in my bachelor's and my master's are still very used, but I just get to have a different type of conversation that I really enjoy. Hope that answered the question.
Thank you so much for the in-between. And also, you might be able to touch upon this a little bit, but Matthew, this may be more related to you. And this next question is, aside from college and mentored studies, what's the best way to get established as a researcher?
Yeah, so whenever you think of full-time career research faculty, you're going to have to have a PhD for the most part. However, there are plenty of options in between, and I'm a good example of that. So I started in Dr. Swain's lab, actually, and learning how to capture electroencephalography data actually is what landed me a position within my experimental psychology program at Augusta University. That opened up even more doors for me to work in a cognitive neuroscience lab, where I then was able to learn functional magnetic resonance imaging, coding, things like that. And so I think one thing is having a unique skill. I think another thing is being willing to put yourself out there and network. Also be professional, know how to spin your CV. And then, yeah, I would say networking is probably the biggest thing. If you've never done research before, and you're getting into it for the first time, and then it kind of builds upon itself the more that you go. That research opportunity led me into a now adjunct faculty position, and working within research allowed me to pivot into research administration careers. So I've worked with the Institutional Review Board at Augusta University, and now I work for the Office of Research Integrity and Security. And so I'm working very closely with the Division of Sponsored Programs, Institutional Review Board, IACUC, the regulatory body for animal research, innovation and commercialization, export control, research security type things. And so honestly, the working in your lab specifically is what opened up all of that for me. But then where I had to take it was going out, networking, figuring out what I wanted to do by talking to the right people and being able to talk to them. Yeah.
I'm so glad to hear that. If y'all didn't catch what Matthew is referring to as IRB, so for any of y'all that have submitted an IRB to our university, our IRB is in Columbia. If you were at Augusta University, it would be Matthew that would be reviewing your proposals for research. So that is another area that you could go into if you're interested in research but not necessarily wanting to go into a PhD position. You could be on the administration side of the research world. There's a lot of opportunities for that, involving also grant oversight, grant administration, and things such as that. I think there's even a degree for just research administration, right?
Not at Augusta University, but they do have career paths specifically for people who want to go into the administrative piece of it. And a lot of them don't have any personal research experience, that is true. So if you're not fully committed to becoming a full-time researcher, which is actually very difficult and competitive at any level, but administration is definitely fulfilling, and it broadens your scope, I would say.
And if anybody has a follow-up question to what your panelists are saying, or a follow-up question to a question that I have, feel free to interject. We don't need to wait till the end for me to open up the floor and allow y'all to ask questions. Do you guys have any questions thus far, based on what was just mentioned or the previous two questions, Luke?
What did you say that you did? You said something about cybersecurity. I didn't really catch exactly what you were saying.
I'm in a PhD program now.
Okay.
That is, so general psychology bachelor's, applied experimental psychology master's, which is broad because experimental psychology pretty much covers anything that's not clinical psychology. And then I had some grant funding from the DoD where I worked in things like camouflage breaking, human-machine teaming, the role of artificial intelligence in military applications and things like that. And now I work as the research security officer. So I interpret policy and create new rules for the institution based on the federal and state regulations. So I've pivoted a little bit. Even though I'm doing research on the side, I still teach, core psychology courses for the institution. I'm now enrolled in a PhD program that's very policy oriented. It's intelligence, defense, and cybersecurity policy. And so, believe it or not, there actually is a lot of experimental psychology embedded within that. Think about cyber operations, social media influence, things like that. Those things are much more prevalent than what you may think. And so that's kind of how I've pivoted and where my current research interests lie.
Thank you.
Lainey, since you haven't been, oh, it's the back of my head on that video. That's my head good from back there. Goodness. Lainey, since you haven't been able to participate yet, I'm going to let you answer this question first. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
This question is, what was the hardest thing about transitioning from being a student to being in the workforce full time?
Ooh, I'm not gonna lie, I didn't think it was too terrible. Just being realistic, if you've ever had a job before, the transition itself isn't hard. I think I also really lucked out in the places that I chose to work. I felt very supported. I got a lot of help and feedback as far as transitioning into clinical work. It's a huge leap if you don't get with the right place. I know I spoke last year about, I originally worked at a private practice that kind of just let you go, didn't really help, and I felt like I was drowning. And then when I went into community mental health, I know it's a big stigma that nobody wants to work in community mental health, but I have never in my life learned more than I have learned in community mental health as far as resources and how to help people and advocacy work and things like that. So, at first it's a lot to juggle kind of getting your feet wet, but I've had a lot of people reach out to me from USC Aiken about, filling out their applications and tests and studying and things like that. So I know that me personally, I'm sure the other panelists have no problem helping out with how to, transition into those phases in clinical work. But although I don't think it's too bad transitioning from school, USC Aiken sets you up as far as the grad program. I couldn't get trained any better in the work that I do. I get ample compliments all the time about my writing and diagnosing and treatment and things like that. And I see other people's work and I'm just where did you come from? So it's definitely, USC Aiken is a very intensive program, but it's well worth it.
Thank you, Lainey. Do y'all have anything else to add to that? The transition from student life to professional life. The hardest thing.
I'll say for me, it was a little difficult because, like I said, I got my undergraduate from USC Aiken, but I got my graduate degree from Liberty University, and I did that online. And it wasn't necessarily the same, and I guess it's kind of different for me also because I'm more looking towards a criminal justice, forensic psychology side. But it's what they teach you in school and in the books is just different in everyday world. So I just kind of had to get adjusted to what I learned and kind of put it together in my professional career.
So the translation of what you learn into the application of the
Right.
everyday real world. Yeah. Do y'all have anything else to add to that? Thank you.
I will briefly mention, I personally did not have a bad transition, but as you can see, I've pivoted a lot, and my scope is pretty large. I also worked the entire time I was in undergrad and through my master's program. So for me, it wasn't about applying a very specific skill set to the job. It's more about, my philosophy is that pretty much anyone can do anything. It's how you write your CV and it's your willingness to learn something new. I feel like you can learn pretty much anything, and most of that training is going to happen on the job. And so with psychology, it's a very versatile degree. There are people who process invoices for solar panel companies. I have a friend who does that. She makes way more money than me doing that, and she's got an advanced degree in psychology. I know a professional skateboarder with a psychology degree probably also makes more money than me. So the biggest thing is on-the-job training, and as you transition from your bachelor's to graduate school or into a profession, if you have the time or the resources, a internship is going to be valuable for you because you'll get that training, something valuable to add to your CV, and it'll help point you in the direction that you think that you want to go. So if you can afford to do it, do an internship, shadow, things like that. I think that's very important.
Great. Okay. Any follow-ups? Simon?
I had a question on the last one.
Yeah.
But so you said you worked in the department, like for the Department of Defense, with like research and stuff like that. How did you like that? Like, did they give you creative control over what you worked on, or were they more like assigning the things that you were looking into?
So I did not work directly for the Department of Defense. I had grant funding from the Department of Defense. And usually with federal funding agencies, what will happen is there'll be a call for proposals. Some of them are rolling, some of them are like specific timelines, and sometimes the focus of those projects are more narrow than others. So the research that I worked on that was funded by the Department of Defense was human-machine teaming paradigm meeting. So, you know, go out to San Diego, discuss with what the goals of the military currently are, and then we have proposals, a couple different ones that will say, we could do this, or we could do this, or we could do this. That research was more narrow in scope, but in general, you do have creative freedom as long as it fits within what they're looking for.
That's a great question. I wouldn't even have thought of that stuff when I was like going this route.
Right.
Excellent. Anything else that y'all have to add or want to add? Okay. All right. The next question is, what is one misconception students often have about your job or the path to get there? I stumped him, Mercer.
I think it's different depending on whether you're an industry worker who's kind of like not really doing psychology versus whether you're a full psychology researcher or you're a clinician. The clinician, I feel like you're gonna get people who say like, oh, are you trying to diagnose me? Like all the time, like that kind of vibe. I'll answer it in the context of my role as the research security officer, having worked in research compliance. And this is less for students, but sometimes who are submitting their projects to the IRB, or even faculty who are submitting, they see us as a roadblock. They don't want to work with you. They just see you as like this barrier to them being able to do their research. So understanding the nuance that goes into making research possible, especially whenever you have, you know, millions, billions of dollars coming in for research and all the different things like that. And so there are billions of regulations that dictate the kind of research you can do and things like that. So I think that that's a hurdle and a misconception that you're just trying to, it's very bureaucratic, you're trying to prevent me from doing my research, when that's not really the case. They're there for a reason. So.
Great. Brandon, do you have a misconception about your?
Yeah, I can speak to one. I guess from the clinical, for people that want to take the clinical route, like a lot of people in general think counselors are there for like advice. A lot of patients or clients will say like, well, what's your advice? Or we're coming here for like your advice on what to do. So you never give a patient your advice. It's always like your suggestion or like your thoughts. Like you don't ever want to rope them into telling like what your advice may be, because if your advice is wrong, then they're going to come back and say, well, this was your advice, this is what you told us to do, and we did it and it didn't work out. So that's one thing that I would say, like, everybody looks for the counselor to, like, you're there for advice, and that's not really a reason for being a counselor. It's there to, like, help people, like, guide them through their journey. So a lot of the times we look to, like, talk it through with somebody and be like, well, what do you think you should do in this type of situation, or what are your thoughts about it? But a lot of times people will look for you to be, like, the expert on everything, and you're not always going to be the expert on everything. Like, you can collaborate with people. You also don't want to end up in a legal situation too because you gave your advice.
Going back to the clinical side, how do y'all maintain a work-life balance where you don't carry home what you hear clinic?
That one can be challenging for me because even when I'm not 8:30 to 5, we have like after hours on call, in which we are a 24/7 program that if somebody calls our crisis line, we have up to 60 minutes to respond. But we rotate who's on call. But the days that I'm not on call, it's like I try to take time just to kind of like be with family, like do things that I actually enjoy, like eat your favorite foods, hang out with friends and family, like acknowledge the things that are not related to work, and that kind of helps. But I guess in this like current role that I have, it can be a little bit more challenging because there's always a day throughout the week where I am doing like work after work.
I would like to continue that if anyone else wants to add, the question, I don't know, Lainey, if you heard, was how do you maintain a work-life balance and how are you able to not bring work home?
I definitely think that one's super hard. I mean, especially for me, I feel like everyone kind of knows me, knows I just like to work and that's just my thing. But I had 3 jobs, so I kind of always bring work home. That's just, I find extreme passion in what I do, so it's sometimes hard for me that I have to actually put in my work schedule, like go home from work and do no work or something like that. So like, I think it's just like purposeful, intentional time that you devote to yourself each day is really the best way to say it, because people will push your boundaries as far as you let them, but you know, it's kind of just, if you like the work, it's hard to say no to it. So I think that's just kind of everyone's preference. I have some people I know I work with that after 5 o'clock, they turn off their work phone, they don't do anything else but go home. So I think it's really just like, you know, and like you set boundaries and whatever those look like is up to you.
Great, thank you. Okay, yeah, so, go.
I'll just say that I didn't do a very good job of that when I was a clinician, but one thing that helped me and I think could help future clinicians is finding a really great supervisor. So when you do have a provisional license, you do have to get a certain amount of hours in supervision. And so being able to find someone that you can trust, rely on, and value their opinion, and being able to say, hey, I'm having a hard time turning it off, what do you do? Find someone else in the profession that you can talk to about that, because it can be really hard. And so make sure you find a good supervisor so they can give you some good suggestions when you actually get into that work.
That's great advice as well. You had a question?
Yeah, this one is for my black people. I know y'all work in like scary situations. Did grad school ever prepare you for that, or did you just have to learn through work?
You can answer first.
I would say, kind of like Lainey was talking about earlier, like USC Aiken is a fairly like well-rounded program, so you get a lot of things from that program. So if anybody's thinking, whether it's research or clinical route, you get a lot of like experience and opportunities in that program. So I think like a lot of the situations that may come up, whether it's clinical-wise, you can talk it through in that program, or you may just run into some opportunities that allow you to talk through some safety issues. Like I know personally for me, when I was in the program, I did like a house visit with like no pre-training to that, but I was able to talk it through with like a professor, like some safety things as far as like what do I do like if the session gets out of hand, or whatever the case may be, like who am I going to call for law enforcement, and then what professor am I going to contact to let them know that things are kind of going left. So I think in that program, like you learn a lot of things as far as related to safety, but the rest of it is just kind of like on the job training and things like that.
And I would say both. Like, for me, I was unfortunate. It was unfortunate because it was around COVID when I went to get my master's degree. But so I couldn't like enroll in any internships, or like everyone was denying me because they were afraid of COVID. but when I was able to start my career, I had a great supervisor, and she taught me everything. So I think like it's also an importance of getting that internship if you can, and having a good supervisor plays a good role in it.
Thank you, great question. Right.
Well, you mentioned supervisors and the importance of needing a great supervisor. What do you look for in a great supervisor? What pushes someone for being, okay, we look to a great supervisor? What should we be looking for when looking for someone with great character?
And for the rest of the class, if you didn't hear that, the question was, what do you look for in a supervisor? What separates a great supervisor from an okay supervisor? Is that what I heard?
I would say training. I was put in a position where I did not have a good supervisor, and that came from having a job where I had a good supervisor. So I really want to say training. I want to say the rapport that you build with the people that you're training. I think most of it is a lot of people feel like, oh, because now that I'm a supervisor, I didn't know like how to, go about it. But like a lot of people that are put in that position, they kind of feel like they need to walk in and like they're big and bad, but ultimately it's about caring for, your employees and making sure that they are okay. So I think that it's the rapport, and I think that it's training.
I will say when I was shopping around for supervisors with my license, one thing that really set one apart from the others, because we were interviewing each other, I didn't know if the private practice or place that I would work at would provide one to me, and so I was kind of on the hunt for one. And I remember one specifically said, well, I have a list, you can contact any of my previous supervisees and talk to them about their experience with me. And that showed me that she clearly is confident in what service she's offering, and I was able to talk to one of them, and they spoke really highly. So I wasn't just taking her word for it, I was taking somebody else's, and I think her opening the door for that allowed me to find comfort. And so, I think if they allow you to talk to someone else they've worked with, that to kind of set the bar over for me. It's just one kind of tangible thing that happened. But.
Yeah, that's great advice. Lainey, did you have anything to add to that?
I definitely agree, do your research. I had to switch my supervisors, halfway through my journey, so, make sure that who you pick is someone that you like, and, reminding yourself that you share your clients with them, so somebody that you trust who's going to answer the phone, who's going to know what to tell you what to do, that, you are learning and you're not going to have the answers, so you need to have someone who really does have the answers for you, or is going to make sure that they go to, all lengths and measures to find it, if not. And one thing I definitely always recommend is, my job that I'm at now, supervision is actually included, and they actually pay you to go to supervision. So that's another thing. Supervision gets very expensive. I know that deters a lot of people from licensure. So just making sure that, you're going to somebody who has a reasonable price. Anybody who's passionate about what they do is not looking to get a ton of money off of you. They're looking to give good advice and help you with your career path. So definitely just think about it. And like I said, I'm local to the Augusta area, so if anyone has questions about supervisors, I have no problem, helping you talk about who are some good recommendations that I've heard. But, pick who you feel comfortable working with for at least 2 years, probably more.
And these answers translate not just to supervisors in a clinical setting, but if you're going to graduate school, you also have a mentor that typically you will self-select or at least have some options to choose from. So either a mentor, a faculty advisor, or somebody that is directly overseeing your path in that graduate program. So everything that they're saying applies in that realm as well. So great questions. All right, next question is, you guys already answered a little bit of this, but add to it. Specifically, the question is, what is your current occupation? Which you have all stated, but what is the education level required for your current position? Do you need additional training or additional degrees or any additional certifications or other experiences that you would recommend seeking out? Did I ask that correctly? There's a lot to that.
Mine is kind of simple. I just need a bachelor's degree, but they prefer a master's degree. And to be in academic advising, especially in like a supervising role, going to our national association, NACADA, and getting some certificates, or going to conferences to learn more is always appreciative, but I think a master's would be probably a good goal if you want to go into something in the realm of higher education.
I'll say for me, bachelor's is required, but master's, I mean, you're always going to make more money when you have higher education, so.
For my full-time position as the research security officer, technically it's a bachelor's, but with the caveat of 5 to 7 years of relevant experience. So that's a big piece, with a master's preferred or PhD preferred. For teaching, if you want to teach at the college level, you're going to have a hard time finding a position where you don't have a master's, but technically you are certified to teach at the college level with 18 credit hours, graduate credit hours in your specialization. So if you started a master's program or a PhD program and didn't finish, as long as you had 6 3-credit hour courses, you would be able to teach technically in that specialty. At the undergraduate level, you couldn't teach graduate students. But a master's is obviously going to be preferred. And they're few and far between. Most teaching positions are going to require a PhD, especially if you're wanting to do that full time. You could be a lecturer if you got lucky, but they would definitely prefer that you at least have the master's degree for that.
For my position, it's required to have a master's, and any full-time clinician under me, they also must have a master's in like some type of counseling field. And usually for the state, you at some point have to pursue your license, like your clinical license. And that involves like 120 hours of supervision face-to-face with the supervisor. And also, I think it's 1380 like face-to-face client hours that you would also have to complete, and that usually takes around 2 years. For people that are kind of just like unsure about what to do, we also like accept like volunteer and / internship. So if people are like interested and then maybe like only a bachelor level, they can contact us, and we can kind of go through a process of, and if it's appropriate, allowing that person to intern with us, and they can do some pretty cool experiences, whether it's going on a crisis call with us or we connect them with another department. Like if they're interested in just like children's services, we can even connect with them.
And Lainey?
So mine's pretty much kind of like the same as Brandon, obviously, because I have a master's, because I'm also an RPC. It's just I'm in Georgia, so the way that you go about doing it is just a little bit different. So like Georgia, you can take your test at any point after you have your master's degree in hand. You just have to do the application and get approved. And then after that, you have to have 2 full years of supervision and direct work experience before you can apply for your licensure. But I just tell everybody, in my opinion, Georgia is probably one of the easiest states to get licensed in. Their criteria is like one of the lowest. Pretty sure it's exact match to South Carolina. South Carolina, you just take your test first before you can do everything else. But in my opinion, Georgia is probably one of the easiest, and the license transfers to a lot of other states. So that's always my advice to everybody. Is if you're just staying local, Georgia is pretty easy.
Good advice. Okay, thank you all. The next 2 questions, Tyler, would you like to ask them, or do you want me to?
I merged them.
What was that?
I kind of merged them earlier because
You merged them earlier. Okay, so one of the questions was, how important is graduate school for your line of work, which kind of was just answered. What advice would you give to students deciding whether or not to pursue graduate school?
Throw your hat in the ring anyway, because you might as well just apply and see what happens. You'd probably regret not applying and then not having the opportunity rather than getting the opportunity and then being able to decide later. So if you're not sure, I know that the application fees are probably something you don't want to have to worry about, but I would throw your hat in the ring anyway and decide once you have that acceptance or not. That probably doesn't get to the meat of the question on like what should I do, but I think you should apply anyways if it's a thought in your mind.
I'd like to ask a related question, which is, I've been considering taking the prerequisite courses for MCG. What would you say about going down that path with a psychology degree?
MCG.
The Medical College of Georgia.
Oh. Medical
Like
school.
to go into medical school?
Yes, like you go to be maybe like a psychiatrist.
Definitely make sure you know all the prerequisites. It sounds like you probably already have that list, but typically it's pretty lengthy. So I definitely make sure that you know what those prerequisites are to make sure you can fit them into your degree, and maybe talk with your advisor to see how they would fit into your current psychology degree, since the one doesn't have as many science classes. So you might be looking at a couple extra classes, maybe over the summer, or an extra semester, just depending on how things line up. So definitely make a plan. Make sure they will fit in your graduation timeline.
It's definitely doable, though. There are a lot of psychology majors who end up going into medicine. A lot of them don't know which residency that they want ahead of time, like what you're saying with psychiatry, but yeah, definitely doable. There's a lot of psychology. I know human development is a prerequisite, for instance, for that. The broader question about graduate school. In this economy, I would think about it hard, because you got to think about it like this. The bachelor's is going to be your most versatile degree, unless you get a degree in something like engineering or something like that, very specific. The master's, a little bit more specific. The PhD, the most expensive. I mean, the most expensive. Freudian slip. The most specific, also the most expensive, because you got to think a lot of graduate programs, whether master's or PhD level, professional level as well, you're not going to be able to work, more than likely. You're going to have to take an assistantship if they offer them, and that will not cover your bills. So you will have to take out some loans unless you get scholarships, which a lot of graduate programs, unless you're really lucky, aren't going to have a substantial amount of scholarships. I will say there are people who move into industry level positions with bachelor's degrees who are making 2, 3, 4 times the amount that I'm making. If you do not plan on staying within academia, a PhD is probably not going to be worth it for you. Not always, unless, like I said, it's something highly specific and specialized that you want to do. That's my practical advice.
One of the best pieces of advice that I ever got was actually from Dr. Pazza, and he literally looked at me and said, are you doing it for the title, or are you doing it for the love of what you're doing? And so it's like, really think about, you're signing up for something for the next 30, 40, however long you are in the field practicing for. Are you doing it because you are doing it to have the title of doctor or LPC or clinician, or are you doing it because you love what you do? And I know that right there deterred me from the PhD, because I love what I do and I was satisfied with a master's in LPC, and I could never go on further. So just really think about, why is it that you're going to do what you're going to do?
You're going to have to take a big course load of advanced science classes like organic chemistry and all of those. And also you're going to have to take physics and stuff like that. So if you're not doing any of those classes, I would apply for classes like those next semester. And also if you have any disabilities and stuff like that, their disability center is kind of trash. And also the chemistry department too. So still clear them. Yeah.
Okay.
I will briefly follow up that if you're wanting to practice medicine in some capacity, if that's your goal, you can do that without getting an MD or a DO. They have fast tracks, for instance. If you wanted to finish up your psychology degree, get your nursing school prereqs, you could finish an MSN in 18 months that's geared for people who have bachelor's degrees that are not in nursing. And then from there, fast track to something like nurse practitioner. And it's a way shorter time than what it would take for 3-4 years of medical school, 3 to 7 years of residency, depending on your specialization. If you wanted to subspecialize, 1 to 3 years of fellowship after that. So it depends on what your goals are. You can do a lot at the master's level, whether physician assistant, nurse practitioner, or something like that.
Another thing, I'll just like briefly add on that. Another thing is you can like ask if you're looking into graduate school, you can ask to meet with someone that's like teaching in that program. Because sometimes what you see online isn't like the full picture of what you're going to be actually doing in that program. So you actually want to make sure that it aligns with what you want to do as far as your end goal. And the best thing that you could probably do, which can be challenging, is like talk to somebody that's in that program. So like current students that's in that program. So for me, like I was actually working with Colette at the time. So like I could overhear conversations and just talk to her like personally. So like I knew the intensity of the program and I could like base a decision off that. But like talking to people who are actually going through it is going to be the best way to decide like, that's like something that I do or don't want to do.
And I want to add to that as well. A master's or a PhD program are not your only options for further education. I'll just go ahead and put in a plug, for example, which kind of coincides with the question about certification. So if you are interested in going into, for example, a research position that also overlaps with a medical field, you can do a 2-year certification in radiology tech, and after 2 years, start off hitting the ground running with an $80,000 salary. So there are a lot of other options that are out there that your psychology bachelor's degree will get you to. It's a matter of seeking those out and knowing which tracks and which opportunities are out there for those positions. And of course, the Career Center is here to help you find out all of those other opportunities that exist. Okay. Yes, Austin.
I wanted to ask, once you start working in one domain of research, how hard is it to branch out and like, say if you started into the cyber, because I've looked at human factors research on the cyber side, if I did that, would I be able to then continue addictions research later down the road? Or is it you kind of get on one track and have to stick with it through the PhD?
If you were to get into a PhD program, yeah, they would expect you to more or less stay pretty refined in your focus. However, the benefit of the way that my life has been for the past couple of years, only at the master's level, applied experimental psychology is broad. So on top of doing my security studies, research, influence, operations, things like that, I also am still actively working in the cognitive neuroscience lab at Augusta University doing neuroimaging research. I also get asked to do programmatic evaluation, so industrial organizational psychology work at Augusta University. So no, to answer your question, you can really do whatever you want. I think having a strong statistics background is going to be the main thing as far as that goes.
I would like to ask the panel a question that has not been asked, but I'm sure it may be burning in your minds. And that is, you don't have to give me your own specifics, but specific to your field. Graduating with the degree that you graduated with for your current position, what is an expected starting salary? I'll ask it for y'all.
As a supervisor, it depends on the department that you are going to be supervising. Like, it's going to depend on like your job duties and if you're supervising other supervisors. As a like regular mental health professional, at least for the state, you're probably going to start at like $52,000 unless you have like a prior certification in like multi-dimensional, like a intensive multi-dimensional like family therapy certification. That can give you like a little bit more money. But if you're like fresh out of graduate school as a mental health professional, you'll probably start around 52,000.
So for me, whenever I first got my bachelor's, I had a part-time job at the pharmacy as a pharmacy technician. I don't even know how much, Aisha and I worked together at the pharmacy actually. I think we started out, when we first started, maybe $9, $10 an hour, something like that. It kind of work up a little bit. And so, I don't know, a couple $100 every week. Not a whole lot. But then, you know, you find odd and end jobs after that. Just because I wasn't actively searching, I wasn't doing a big search on finding something super psychology specific at the time. I ended up working for an orthopedic office, for instance, making probably $30,000. Went back and got my master's. Immediately following that, worked for the Institutional Review Board. I think starting out there was around 40,000, so not a huge jump. Then stayed there, worked my way up. By the time I left the Institutional Review Board, I was probably closer to 60. In my current position as a manager, and I'm the only one at the institution who does this job, I'm making, with this position alone, maybe 85, something like that, and then I do a couple contracts for teaching. So at my level, teaching contracts or teaching positions are contract based, so I make around $4,500 per class per semester, and I usually do about 2 classes. So in total right now, combining all of those things, I make a little over 100, 105, I think specifically, gross. So before insurance and all the other things, taxes. And I'll just briefly mention, I know that was long, I do not usually get paid for research gigs. That is almost exclusively for personal interests and CV building. It helped me get into a PhD program and things like that, but unless you're doing that full time, you're probably not going to get paid, and if you are getting paid for that, it's going to be not that much. But you can make a career out of that. If you wanted to go straight into a research field as a research assistant, work your way up to research associate, you'll probably start out around 40. I know research associates who make, 80, 90.
For me, when I graduated from USC-Aiken, I worked with kids with disabilities. And starting out there, I didn't know what I wanted to do originally. I know psychology is very broad. And so I just wanted to try something out and see how I liked it. And I worked there for about 5 years. I want to say my leave-in pay was probably roughly around $35,000.
Were you a behavioral interventionist?
I was an early interventionist.
Early interventionist, okay.
And I went back to school after my graduate program and just completely switched from this end of psychology to this end. So I took a pay cut. Victim advocate, I think original pay is like for the state about $32,000, and if you're working for, because there's different agencies, so you're working for either the state or you're working for the county. When I switched over to the county, my pay went up. I think the starting pay for the county is like $42,000 maybe. And then supervisor position is roughly around $60,000 starting out. So.
And you don't have to go here.
I work here. Higher education is not the place to go if you want to get rich, but it is the place to go if you care about students and people's education, but I'm going to bow out of that because I just feel weird answering that where I work. I will say when I worked at the private practice though, one thing to consider, a lot of times you get a percentage. So where community mental health, you're probably paid a salary. At a private practice, you negotiate a percentage. So when insurance pays out your private practice, they're going to say, here you get 42% of what we're paid back, or 50% or 60%, and it typically goes up once you're fully licensed. And I think what I negotiated was 40-something%, which was actually on the lower end of things, but I didn't know that until I got a good supervisor who was like, that's a really terrible deal. And so just make sure you're negotiating and learning a lot before you sign a contract, and talk to someone who knows a lot more than you do to make sure you're not shorting yourself.
Where I work, being that it is community mental health, it's kind of like what Brandon said. You do start off a little bit lower at a master's level. I think it was like 45, I want to say. I do know some positions are even lower, so just kind of looking out for, what you need to pay your bills. Once you get your APC, so your associate professional license, it went up to, I think it was like 55. And now with my LPC, with my full-time, is about 90. And then I do have, like I said, 2 other part-time jobs that I do. I do contract work with the state, and then I also work at the hospital. So I think, between my 3, I think it's like 112 or something like that. So it really is just kind of where you work, and ours is paid for service, kind of like Colette mentioned. So like I work and see a lot of people, so it is a little bit higher for me than some others. So it's really just making sure, like she said, you're paying attention to the numbers that they provide you, and if it's salary, or you'll hear the words like paid for service, and that's what it means with, like she was explaining with the percentages.
All right, thank you all so much. That was my question. We have 10 minutes left. Corey?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask because obviously some of them here have an idea what they want to do, some do not, but just even thinking back on your time as a student, what are some things that you would suggest, and Brandon, I know you mentioned a little bit about the volunteer, what are some things you think that they could be doing now to help with that process of either decision making, building experience, whatever, with that? So any advice that you all may have on what they possibly could be doing now to kind of prepare?
Say volunteer experience, informational interviews. If you can do job shadowing, that's another thing. Go visit career services. That would probably be about all the suggestions that I would say.
I would say, fun fact, whenever I was at USC Aiken, I changed my major 13 times. So I wish that I had this kind of advice. I would say I had no idea what I wanted to do. But what helped me figure out what I wanted to do was networking. I think that is the biggest thing for me. Don't be scared to, what is it called? Cold calling, or call people up and ask them. I got this position that I'm currently in by making a phone call. I saw a vacancy and I called and I was like, hey, can we talk about this? And then they were like, okay. I think the other biggest thing is at all times, at this stage, you should be updating your CV every couple months. Any special projects you do for a class, any presentations, any events that you go to, make sure your CV is up to date. And then whenever you're applying for a job, do not submit your CV to them. That's what you should submit whenever you're applying to graduate school. You might refine it a little bit, but you'll want to submit a resume that is a consolidated version that highlights the skills that are specific to the job that you're applying for. They don't necessarily want to know everything that you've ever done for a job. They want to know that whenever you're applying to graduate school. But you want to make sure to highlight the specific skills that they're looking for. And you can pretty much spin any experience, in my opinion, to any job. So that's my advice.
I would say intern, if you can. Like he said, cold calling. I'm kind of old fashioned. I mean, I'll go up there and actually speak to someone. I mean, research career services. Just ask for help when you can.
I really like informational interviews, so I agree with Brandon on that. I did a couple during my undergraduate. There's a lot of questions you can Google, or I'm sure Corey's office has some, but it really allows you to learn, just like we're trying to, in short snippets, teach you guys here a little bit about what we do or how we got here, but informational interviews really give you a good picture of what somebody does in their day-to-day. If you're not allowed to shadow, there's some laws preventing some things, so informational interviews are your second best option, I think.
Great advice. And Lainey has to go to a client, so she is gone. But we are at 1:09. That is the end of our list of questions. My question, Corey's question. Does anyone have any additional remaining burning questions? We have time possibly for one more.
I have one question.
Maybe two more.
Yeah,
for sure.
go ahead. Good afternoon. My question is, can you shed some light on contracting or consulting? Does that make sense?
Or consulting. Is that? Yeah.
I don't know if I can speak
That was
to
a
that.
Lainey question, and now she's gone.
Yes.
Unfortunately, I can't. I'm sorry. I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not a clinician. I mean, I do something vaguely similar. Whenever I get approached to be on a team for, I don't know, like a programmatic evaluation or something, which it's not quite clinical work. So, yeah, sorry, I don't have a whole lot there.
But something that you mentioned was that you get asked. So
Yeah.
something important to know about that is networking as well. And the more opportunities that you share with others, the more likely they're to think of your name to contact you to contract out some service or consult you on some service. So experience, internship, networking, working in labs. A lot of what happens in the opportunities is through word of mouth by those experiences that you share with others and working for others. That's what I could have to add to that. And last but not least.
If we have enough time, I don't want to hold anybody
Last but not
up,
least,
okay?
we have 4 minutes.
This is a question for anyone that's worked in the clinical or the research side of psychology and everything. With the practices that you previously have worked for or currently still work for, are there certain internal departments that specifically focus on a certain demographic of individuals and everything? So say, for example, a veteran that's suffering from PTSD, TBI, Gulf War syndrome, et cetera, things like that.
When I interviewed at the private practice I worked at, there's only one, so I can only speak to that, but I was able to state the population I wanted to work with. And then when there were new clients who were onboarded or calling to see a clinician, they would ask me if I was comfortable taking that client on before assigning them to my caseload. And so that was the rhythm that they worked. If there was ever one that kind of was teetering the line, if I said no, then the answer was no, and they weren't put on my caseload. So you just make sure that when you're interviewing and going through the process that you are very clear on what their practices are, so you're not thrown a case of someone maybe with borderline personality disorder and you haven't worked with that yet, and then you're stuck, on your caseload. And so make sure you're interviewing them too.
And I would like to add to that as well. If anybody is interested in working with a specific population, you need to make sure whatever program or accreditation location you go to is accredited to work with that population. So we used to have a barrier, for example, in our clinical program in working with the VA, because our accreditation did not mesh with the VA's accreditation. That's no longer the case. We've now merged, but depending on which location you are getting your degree from, you may be limited with where you could go after that and who you're able to work with after that. So the VA is just one example that we did have a limitation with that in our program previously. We don't any longer, but it does exist in other programs depending on what their accreditation situation is. So you do want to know what's compatible with where you want to go and who you want to be working with.
Yes, ma'am.
Anything else to add to that, Brandon?
I guess the other thing to look for is gonna also come down to like insurance things. So for like private practice, they kind of can determine what they want to do about like that. But like for an agency, what does it say, Aiken Barlow, we aren't in network with TRICARE. So a lot of veterans, they have TRICARE. So they can still receive services from us, but it'll come down to self-pay because we aren't in network with their insurance. So that could be another question that if you're going up for an interview or if that's a population that you want to work with, that would be something to kind of bring up to the agency that you particularly want to work for.
Great question. All right, y'all, I think that we have 2 minutes left, so I think we are at a good point to thank our panelists for coming. Thank y'all for coming. I hope that you were able to learn something and get some guidance on your own future careers. If you came in late and did not get your ACE credit, please come see Corey. If you came in late and I didn't get your attendance, which I think I did get everybody, but just double check Blackboard and make sure that I got your attendance for the day.
Let's thank every panel.